I will call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 15 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. I know we have some guests here today subbing in for their colleagues, so welcome to our committee. The committee is meeting today in public to study report number 1, Respect in the Workplace of the 2019 Fall Report of the Auditor General of Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The webinar format is for public committee meetings and available only to members and their staff. All functionalities for active participants remain the same, and staff will be non-active participants only and can therefore only view the meeting in gallery view. I'd just like to remind members, as well as for the benefit of our witnesses, of a few rules to follow. And before I do, I would just ask you, Madam Clerk, is there anybody in the room?
No, all the members are participating via Zoom today.
Thank you. So for all of you, interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. Also, when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly to assist our interpreters with the interpretation. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom is mandatory for everyone participating. And as always, should any technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to at that time suspend as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. Before I welcome our witnesses today, I would like to advise you that I've been informed that the Deputy Minister for Public Service and Procurement Canada is not available for our meeting next Tuesday. So we have rescheduled things on the calendar and and I'm proposing that we study some draft reports that are ready for us. If you do have any questions, please save them for the last 5 minutes. We'll make sure to suspend the meeting and move into that time to answer any questions for you. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. Joining us today from the Office of the Auditor General are Martin Dompierre, Assistant Auditor General, and Susan Gomez, Principal. From the Canada Border Services, I would like to welcome John Osowski, President, and with him today is Louise Udale, Vice President, Human Resources Branch. And we also have the Commissioner of Correctional Services Canada, Anne Kelly, and Nick Fabiano, Assistant Commissioner, Human Resource Management Sector. Mr. Dompierre, I am going to turn to you to begin. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je vous remercie de nous donner l'occasion.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on respect in the workplace tabled in the Parliament in February 2020. Joining me today is Susan Gomez, who led the audit team. CBSA and Correctional Services Canada, like all federal employers, are required to provide their employees with respectful workplaces that are free of harassment, discrimination, and violence by co-workers and supervisors. This is important because the well-being of employees suffers when the workplace is unhealthy. In addition, employees are less likely to report concerns if they perceive that their employer does not take them seriously. Issues that are not reported cannot be resolved and may affect employees' health. The additional pressures of the current pandemic on employees make it especially important that employers provide healthy workplaces. In this audit, we found that Canada Border Services Agency and Correctional Service Canada did not do enough to promote and maintain respectful workplaces. Our audit report included the results of a survey we conducted with the employees of these two federal organizations. The results showed that the employees who responded to the survey had concerns about respect in their workplaces. More than 1/3 of survey respondents stated that they feared reprisal if they made complaints of harassment, discrimination, or workplace violence. They also had serious or significant concerns about organizational culture and about a lack of civility and respect in their workplaces.
Knew that there were problems of harassment, discrimination, and violence in the workplace, neither had developed a comprehensive strategy to address them, including a way to measure and report on their progress towards reducing harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence. Federal employers are encouraged to offer informal mechanisms such as meeting between individual employees and mediation for resolving complaints to help restore working relationships more quickly. We found that in the harassment and workplace violence complaints we reviewed, both organizations did not always tell employees that they could use informal processes. In addition, we found that the organizations did not always do an initial assessment before deciding whether to accept or dismiss a complaint. The lack of initial assessment can lead to inconsistencies in the decision-making process and in the treatment of complaints. Finally, we found that in the majority of the harassment complaint cases that had been investigated and resolved, the organization had ordered restorative actions aimed only at individuals involved. In other words, the restorative actions were not aimed at establishing or reestablishing an harmonious working relationship within the affected team, group, or unit. This is important because the behaviors leading to these complaints can have a long-lasting and broad impact on relationships in the workplace. The Canada Border Services Agency and Correctional Service Canada agreed with all our recommendations and have prepared action plans to address them. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any question the committee may have. Thank you.
We will now be going to Mr. Oselski for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Public Accounts Committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm joined by Louise Udale, the Vice President of our Human Resource Branch. Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité à participer à la discussion.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in the discussion today.
Pleasure to appear before you today to share details on the efforts we have taken to effect positive change in the culture of the CBSA. I would like to thank the Office of the Auditor General for their work on this report. I welcome the findings and recommendations that they have put forward. Let me be clear, the CBSA has zero tolerance for harassment, discrimination, or violence in our organization. The Auditor General's report laid bare some of the issues we have at the CBSA in the areas of workplace violence and harassment. When the report was tabled, I openly acknowledged those gaps, including how long it takes for the issues to be investigated and resolved. Over the past few years, we have done a tremendous amount of work to change the culture of our organization, focus on people, and address workplace violence and harassment. We acknowledge that systemic racism, intolerance, and discrimination exists, and we are committed to doing the continued work needed to build a more diverse, inclusive, and respectful culture. Several initiatives have been undertaken to understand and further explore root causes of harassment and to identify the concrete actions needed to create a healthier workplace culture, to provide protection to employees, and to address their concerns. We created a center of expertise to educate, prevent, and manage harassment complaints. It's a one-stop shop that any employee can turn to for information, support, and guidance in matters related to harassment or any type of conflict in the workplace. We've also invested in a dedicated team of experts to develop and help implement a comprehensive strategy on culture to get to the root causes behind these unfortunate incidences and to ensure that we build a healthy and vibrant organizational culture. We are also focused on selecting and developing managers who demonstrate people skills, respect for all, empathy, courage, and emotional intelligence, Skills in conflict resolution are also important. These all contribute to creating a psychologically healthier workplace. I also want to confirm that our disclosure process for complaints made to our Senior Officer of Internal Disclosure is confidential. There are many ways for employees to bring their concerns forward. Any issue can be reported to our Senior Office of Internal Disclosure or an immediate supervisor. Employees can also take their concerns directly to the Office of the Public Service Integrity Commissioner of Canada. What's more, if an employee feels targeted because of an incident or an issue that they have reported, that employee can make a complaint to the Public Service Integrity Commissioner. As I said, I'm encouraged that our efforts have started to show some positive results, yet there is still a lot more work ahead of us in order to build on recent indicators in the past. For example, our average positive response to all questions in the 2019 Public Service Employees Survey increased by more than 4 percentage points. We also saw that 3% decrease in the number of cases of harassment reported. Madam Chair, the Auditor General's report identified ways to address the challenges we have in regard to respect in the workplace. Rest assured, we are acting on the recommendations put forward by putting our people first and reinforcing respect, dignity, and fairness. Je me ferai un plaisir de répondre aux questions du committee.
It will be my pleasure to answer committee's questions.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Ms. Kelly for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. With me today is Nick Fabiano, my Assistant Commissioner of Human Resources. Respect and a healthy workplace are a key priority for me as Commissioner, and this needs to be at the heart of everything we do. An organization is nothing without its people. Our 18,000 employees are our greatest assets in successfully carrying out our work. They are hardworking, professional, and passionate about making a difference in the lives of offenders and ensuring public safety. Correctional work can be challenging and stressful, and the well-being of our staff is essential. Harassment, discrimination, or violence have no place in the Correctional Service of Canada. Nous reconnaissons l'importance des constatations.
We recognize the importance of the Auditor General's findings last year, and I want to assure this committee that we have been taking it very seriously and are taking concrete actions. Culture change does not happen overnight. This is something we continue to work at in order to sustain positive change. Since the beginning of the pandemic back in March, our organization has worked tirelessly to implement a comprehensive and coordinated response to limit the risk of COVID-19. This is an important subject. Today is Bell Let's Talk Day, and we're participating in a national dialogue on mental health. Each action counts.
Auditor General's report, we have worked to strengthen our ability to maintain healthy workplaces in several ways. In response to the AG's recommendations, we have reviewed guidelines and tools on harassment and workplace violence, as well as work to ensure employees at all levels of the organization are aware of these resources. A new workplace harassment and violence prevention policy is now in place, together with procedures to respond to incidents of harassment and violence. Comprenant que le changement exige une communication.
Understanding that change requires constant communication, town halls were conducted with staff on several occasions this year, including around CSC Respect Day this November. This was this past November in 2020. I have led several town halls myself with our senior leaders. We have already begun to see changes based on these initiatives. The results of the 2019 Public Service Employee Survey showed that the rates of reported harassment and discrimination have dropped for a second year in a row. The survey also showed that together with the drop in reported harassment rates, there was an increase in the number of respondents that felt that the department is working hard to create a workplace that prevents harassment and discrimination. While this decrease is a positive step in the right direction, we know there is more work to do, and we are working to ensure that respectful behavior is embedded in our culture.
We released our first annual Workplace Climate and Employee Wellbeing Report. This report helps us to monitor the health of our organization and plan for the year ahead. The second report will be released within the next couple of months. Last fall, we launched the National Comprehensive Strategy on Workplace Wellness and Employee Wellbeing. This strategy serves as CSC's foundation for prioritizing activities essential to the respect, well-being, and mental health of employees and managers at all levels. We are now in our third year of the Respectful Workplace campaign. This campaign involves various initiatives, including awareness, promotion, and developing avenues for employees to disclose inappropriate behavior. Lastly, we have also begun planning an audit of CSC's culture. The goal of the audit is to identify ways to make CSC a safer, healthier, more respectful, and violence-free environment for all employees and offenders. Madam Chair, while we know we have more work to do, we are seeing progress. I would like to conclude by using a sentence from an article Dr. Robert Cormier, a psychologist and former executive, shared with me a couple of years ago. It says, "It is essential to recognize that a respectful workplace is not an endpoint. It is a way of doing things moment by moment, day by day, rather than a discrete project to complete." I agree. And day by day, CSC is building a culture where we all lead by example and inspire one another to carry out our important mission and achieve positive correctional outcomes. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you for your opening statements. We will now go to our first round of questioning, which is 6 minutes, and we will start with Mr. Weber.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. I guess I will start my questioning to Mr. Dompier and Ms. Gomez of the Auditor General's department there. I guess my first question is, why did you choose to do an audit on the Canadian Border Services Agency and the Correctional Services of Canada? Why those two organizations?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. So as we conducted this audit, we looked at past survey work that's been done in the public service. As indicated in the report, since 2008, the questions around harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence was included. So also based on reports that were produced by the Private Counsel Office, the reports stress the importance of creating a workplace free of harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence. We also had seen events happening in the news related specifically to one organization in particular, in this case in 2016 and 17, about alleged allegation at Correctional Services Canada. So basically, these were the main reason we had initiated a work around the Canada Border Service Agency and Correctional Service Canada.
Great. Well, thanks for that. You did mention in your audit report in section 1.13 that the CBSA and the CSC knew that their workplaces had problems with harassment, discrimination, and violence. Both undertook some activities to address these problems, and it's apparent here today from their testimony that they obviously have made an effort to address some of these problems. However, in your report to Mr. Dompier, you mentioned that neither had a strategy based on risk to address these issues, and also that there were also no performance measurement frameworks to help the organization measure and report on progress toward reducing harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence. So what organizations then would you recommend that the CBSA and the CSC look to as a model to follow? Have you done audits with other departments, other agencies or crown corporations in order to find a model that you would recommend that the CBSA and the CSC look at?
So we did not sort of look at other organizations in the context of this audit. We, as you said, focus mainly on these two organizations. As you specified, we did not see a comprehensive strategy put in place by either organization that would help them identify the risk, prioritize the objectives to be reaching, and also measuring results. So unfortunately, we did not do any specific comparison with other organizations as part of this audit.
Okay, so I guess then you really you couldn't say what other department or agency or crown corporation holds that gold standard for workplace harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence policy, and actually for implementing these policies and following these workplace harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence policy. There, you can't really give a recommendation then, obviously, because you haven't done any other audits other than these two, correct?
That is correct. And okay. What I would say, just to conclude, is that as it is an obligation for all federal organizations to implement such measures, I believe that there are definitely maybe some good examples that could be identified in the public service. But unfortunately, we have not looked at that during this audit.
Okay. And no audits in your department either, I would imagine, the Office of the Auditor General?
Exactly. Not yet. Not an audit in the OAG of that nature. Thank you.
But a great environment in the Auditor General's office, I am sure. So, yeah.
Indeed.
In Section 115, Mr. Dompierre, you mentioned that you performed a file review of formal complaints with both the CBSA and the CSC. On that basis of that review, you found that the organizations did not handle formal harassment, discrimination, and workplace violent complaints consistently. When employees filed complaints, the organizations did not always tell employees about formal mechanisms for resolving their complaints or assess the complaints before deciding whether to accept or dismiss them. So, of course, employees would not be happy with how their complaints were handled or with the outcomes in some cases. And I know of some organizations where complaints do drag on and remain as ongoing files for a long time. So I guess my question is, how long does it take on average for each of these organizations, the CBSA and the CSA, to open, investigate, and conclude such complaints?
So it's very, very difficult to determine the exact sort of timeline for a specific complaint. As you saw in the report, there are numerous ways someone could file a complaint. Could go either from an harassment, from a grievance, or a workplace violence complaint. So as we did the audit, it was difficult for the OAG to compare cases. Each cases are unique. If we want to make sure that natural justice takes place and fairness procedure also takes place, it is difficult to say it should take a year, it should take 6 months. I think the example I could give is that in some situation, a complainant could be in leave of absence. So in that case, the investigation would not be started as quickly as desired. So it is somewhat challenging to identify specifically timelines around those such complaints, and that's why in the report we were not in a position to make any observations on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
We will now go on to Ms. Yip.
Good morning. Welcome back to the committee. Belated Happy New Year to you all. Sadly, harassment and discrimination in the workplace is something that still occurs, and I'm thankful that we're having this discussion this morning. Every Canadian deserves to feel safe at work. They shouldn't feel afraid to come to work because of mistreatment by their coworkers or managers. So I hope that there will be some definite improvements. My first question is in regards to the survey results on harassment questions between 2005 and 2017. In both instances, the CSC and CBSA have almost double the percentages. And I'm just wondering why that is for victims of harassment on the job, as well as by coworkers and victims of harassment by individuals with authority over you. Why does this pattern continue? Is it because of the nature of the work? So Ms. Kelly or Mr. Osaki?
Maybe I can start.
Okay.
There's no question that correctional work is very challenging. Certainly, our frontline staff are exposed to traumatic events. Obviously, they respond to situations sometimes such as overdoses, self-harming behavior, potentially suicide attempts. So it's really difficult. In terms of our results on the public service employee survey, we actually saw in the 2019 results that there's been a 6% decrease in respondents indicating that they have been a victim of harassment. There's been also an increase in the percentage of those that are satisfied with the quality of supervision, as well as an increase in those that are satisfied with how interpersonal issues are resolved. So we see that with the initiatives that we've put in place, we're seeing some positive results, but we understand that certainly there is more work to do. And I agree with you. Employees need to feel valued. For me, I've been with the correctional service for 37 years. I love my job. I love coming to work, and this is what I want for every employee. And the other statistics I'll mention is in the public service employee survey, we found that 84% of our staff actually are proud of the work they do, which is significant.
Okay. Perhaps we'll go on to my next question. Mr. Osaki, you acknowledge that systemic racism, intolerance, and discrimination exists. Are there any strategies that you can share with us that addresses the concerns of women and people of color?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. Absolutely. And I would say maybe just as a follow-on to what my colleague was just saying in your first part of your question, I think it comes down to understanding the culture of the organization. Certainly, law enforcement agencies and the cultures that we have been highlighted over the last few years. But I think we're only now sort of getting to the point where we have the tools to actually go and talk about them and the frame to talk about them and say to ourselves, look, is this what we really want? No, everybody would argue that's not the case. And if we're not happy with it, then let's do something about it. And I'm super proud of the work that we've done here, whether it's through our Visible Minorities Advisory Committee, which is a grassroots committee that formed itself that is providing me with advice. And they certainly provided me with advice in the summer after the George Floyd incident about putting out communications and support to our Black employees. But just more broadly in terms of the conversations that we need to have to understand the culture of the organization and what we're prepared to do about it. And we're making huge efforts. I think a critical success factor for us has been that we have a full-time culture team as part of the CBSA Transformation Office that is working with a very dispersed organization. I have over 100 ports of entry across the land and people working abroad in 40 countries. So reaching out, having those conversations, listening to employees, and essentially pulling the bandage off of the culture and exposing it and talking about it. And people are starting to build trust, and I think that's reflected in some of the survey results that we've seen, which are starting to show some positive direction. But I just want to be clear, culture change takes time, and it's going to require persistent efforts, and we're absolutely committed to those efforts.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly, do you have any further comments for your organization in regards to this issue?
Yes, actually, in our organization, we're looking at actually a CSC anti-racism framework and actions. We've already developed it. It has a vision statement and purpose. It has guiding principles, and it's a three-pronged approach. So we're focusing on our staff, focusing on our offenders, but also our stakeholders. So, for example, I have a National Ethnocultural Advisory Committee, like my colleague said, that also advises me on certain issues. I have a National Indigenous Advisory Committee that advises me on Indigenous issues. The other thing, for example, in the Atlantic region, we've worked with Robert Wright, who's a renowned expert in Black cultural competency, and he's actually developed a training for parole officers. So yes, we're doing a lot.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kelly. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. We are over time. I will now move to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. First question for Mr. Dompierre. Thank you for being here. I would say that the conclusions of your report, the conclusions were quite devastating when we look at 1.2, the harassment complaints, and even the concerns of employees at CSC and also CBSA. So in the survey that you spoke to, at 1.1, not 1.2, 3 employees out of 4 are concerned with regards to the organizational culture. And so obviously these are serious concerns that they have. So 3 out of 4 is quite devastating. So we know the procedure, Mr. Dompierre, that says that you're impartial and you're an agent of Parliament in exercising your duties and choosing your subjects for study. And I would like to congratulate you. And also, it's what we expect and what Canadian taxpayers expect, that you're going to be a watchdog for their interests, but also that you'll ensure a good management of public funds. So as to the follow-up, with regards to workplace relations and on the respect that should be found in the workplace at CSC and at CBSA, could you affirm without any doubt that the corrective measures will correct a situation that is quite troubling, in my opinion? Thank you for this question. As you mentioned in the report, we did a survey to determine in each of these organizations what was the opinion of people with regards to respect in the workplace. We made recommendations to this effect. We've also, so we have CBSA and CSC that have action plans, and they detail out the steps that will be taken in order to implement our recommendations. As for our report, we have not yet looked in specific detail at these actions. We believe that the action plans are very reasonable, and we might have the opportunity in the future to do future audits in order to determine if the recommendations that we made were followed up with. Thank you. In your opening statements at point 3, you said that you can't correct a problem that is not highlighted, and this can have an impact on workers' health. If we look at your report, 1.33, it says that when you looked at the harassment and workplace violence complaints, both organizations did not always inform the employees of the informal process, 1 out of 4. Do you find that it's coherent that if organizations are not informing employees about informal mechanisms, this will make it difficult for them to raise issues, to make complaints? Thank you for your question. Of course, when we did this survey, we also noted that people were fearing reprisals if they tabled any complaints with regards to harassment in the workplace. So what you're mentioning is a mechanism. It's a mechanism according to the policies of the Treasury Board that says that complainants do have the right to an informal process to resolve their issue. Of course, if people are not offered this opportunity, necessarily this will undermine the credibility of the process and also will undermine confidence and trust. The complaint, there is a lack of trust as to the complaint process. So all of this has to do with the way that complaints are managed and the way also that people are informed of the different steps that they have a right to through this complaint process. So here, Mr. Dompierre, we talk about organizations at the heart of national safety and the responsibility of the Minister for Public Safety. In my opinion, it seems that a harmonious workplace is more than necessary to avoid employee frustration. This could compromise their own safety. So in your analyses, do you have a moral reassurance that things are going to improve? What's your confidence level that there will be a true improvement here? We made recommendations after our audit, and both organizations have to make sure that complaints are treated in a standardized way. Both organizations accepted the recommendations that were made. We've also made recommendations saying that complaints should be assessed and dealt with as a whole. So there should be documentation in order to support the decisions made to reject or to consider a complaint. So we made a recommendation to this effect. And as I was saying earlier, both organizations did accept to take action and to implement measures to correct the situation. Thank you. Now, Mr. Osowski, hello and welcome. So the conclusions of the report of the Auditor General, well, it's not great for your organization. We talked about the stress linked to the pandemic, and this could have an influence on the personal lives of people, but also lead to reprehensible and regrettable actions by certain organizations. So everyone is on edge, I understand, but we have to stay calm. I'd say that your organization is the most important to ensure safety of citizens. We ensure the health of all our communities, more specifically now. So I see where you can see where I'm going. So according to these conclusions of the OAG, and especially on the fundamental impact of CBSA on collective safety, can you reassure the committee that everything will be solved without having huge strategic meetings or studies? Do you have the moral authority in order to make sure that everyone falls into line and to say that everything will fall into place?
Very much, Mr. Shonka. We have gone over time, so perhaps we can follow up with that question again during another round. I will turn to Mr. Green.
C'est possible sinon avoir une question écrite, Madame la Présidente, ça serait apprécié.
Can I send a written question, Madam Chair?
Yes, absolutely. So we can request that we receive the answer in writing. Thank you.
I would be happy for the good and welfare. I want to begin, Madam Chair, to say that I'm really grateful to this committee for the very thoughtful questions. So if we would like to receive an answer, I'm happy to allow that to happen here in my time. It was a very thoughtful question.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Green. That's very generous of you. So we will start the clock for you, and you can go ahead and answer, sir.
Certainly, thank you for the questions. So just dealing with it in a little bit of sequence, absolutely we take these results seriously. And, to that effect, we're actually doing our own internal audit on how we're progressing in 21-22. I would say that, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we certainly understand the importance of informal ways to deal with this. And we've actually had over 80 informal conflict management information sessions delivered to employees so they understand the avenues that are available to them. I just would like to correct a little bit of a misperception too, is that people, when we think that we're talking about harassment and discrimination, that it's always management to employees. In fact, the majority of these cases are employee to employee, right? So I think it's really important. This is not managers bearing down on their staff. This is something within, in all levels. It's up, down, it's sideways. To the point about whether I have the moral authority to make this all better, that's an interesting question, because I actually would say that this is a collective responsibility of everyone in the organization to make improvements. If you see something that's not right, you have to act. That's what I'm trying to implore on the organization. Don't sweep things under the carpet. If there's something that's not right, and everybody can understand the basics of what's right and wrong in these types of subjects that we're talking about, you have an obligation to act. That's what we're trying to talk about. The culture of the organization has been to sweep things under the carpet, and that's the part that we're changing. And so it's about speaking up and doing something about it with the proper processes and training, choosing the right people so that they can actually act appropriately and stop these things from festering to the point where they blow up into a giant problem that makes it much more harder on everybody to deal with.
Okay. I think that's actually a really good entry point and a segue, and I'd like to continue with you, sir, if you may, because you talked about how often this is an instance or a culture between employees and not necessarily coming down from management, and yet it's fairly clear in this report that there are fears of reprisals. So in your opinion, with the culture of reprisal, with the culture of sweeping things under the rug, in your opinion, would that still be at the staff level, or would that not, in fact, be led by the culture in the direction of management?
Well, I think that management has to sort of pay attention to what's going on. And as I said, where there's smoke, there's fire often. And if they see something going on, then they have to sort of insert themselves into that conversation or whatever's happened and either try and solve it informally, but to let it get to the point where it's a formal complaint that has to be put into place, quite frankly, that's a failure. So I think that the more that you understand what's happening with your teams and nip things in the bud, the better off we're all going to be. That means training for managers. That means soft skills training. That means
if I could interject at that moment, in 2018, when senior management spoke with staff across the country to understand the concerns, in addition, in the summer of 2018, you approved the development of a strategy. It wasn't in place at the end of the audit period. Could you explain why the respectful workplace strategy approved in July 2018 was not in place?
Well, yes, I can actually. Thank you for the question. So what we started with was something very basic, which was a listening tour. So soon after my arrival, and having worked in another organization where I really believe that understanding the culture was a critical element to making any kind of change, and not getting the kind of feedback from the surveys that have been done either with respect by the AG or even the PSES survey, it wasn't helping us understand the issue. So we went around the country and held dozens and dozens of sessions with employees in very sort of Chatham House rules kinds of ways and said, okay, what's going on? And that, first of all, that did two things. It gave us better insight into what was going on. And secondly, it started to build trust that we're listening and that we're going to do something and we're taking it seriously. And we're just starting to see the benefits of that. We're doing little pulse check surveys now, and especially to the previous
what were some of your takeaways? And I'll preface this to say that I'm alarmed when I hear that the visible minorities within your organization, the folks who are providing advisory capacities to you, are formed by itself. Like, that tells me that they saw it upon themselves that there was a challenge. They formed an advisory committee. What are some of your takeaways from this type of advisory function?
Well, they didn't quite form by itself, but there was a champion that was put in place, and that champion basically brought them into place. But absolutely, it was resounding support for something like this. And I think it's just about the shift of the tone.
If I could, but specifically, sir, what were your takeaways? What have you learned from the advisory functions of groups who are organizing to help improve the culture in the workplace?
That we need to speak openly and honestly about what's going on.
Okay. Well, it does appear that I have about 30 seconds left, so I'll reserve the remainder of my questions and comments in a more succinct way to our friends from corrections at the appropriate time, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Green. I will move to our second round of questioning. It's a 5-minute round, starting with Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, and I would thank my colleagues for their learned questions so far. I've certainly benefited from that, and I also would like to thank our witnesses for the progress that they have made, and also recognizing that through the pandemic, they've I'm sure both had some difficult times, especially Mr. Osowski working through the borders. I'm sure that you're working hard to keep all Canadians safe, so I appreciate that. And that being said, I just want to sort of walk through. So one of the key things that I think is successful in making sure that we have a workplace that is relatively okay. Maggie, sorry, my daughter is all right, modern 2021 world is one of the things that I think is key is the vetting process. So to both the CBSA and also to the corrections, what is your process in terms of making sure that bad actors or bad apples don't get the people who are perhaps prone to these type of behaviors do not get into do not get into the CBSA or corrections?
Maybe I can start. So for us in corrections, again, it's very stressful work, and certainly we've had our challenges during COVID as well to keep everyone safe. But in terms of our recruitment, for example, our correctional officers, there is a screening process. There are tests that are administered. For example, the situational judgment tests and others to make sure that we hire the right people. And then they go through a rigorous training program. And certainly myself, as the commissioner, when we have what we call our correctional officer graduation programs, as much as possible, I attend them and I speak with them about the fact that they're peace officers. I speak with them about respect and about ethics and how important it is, and that they serve as role models to the offenders. So definitely for us, we want to ensure that we hire the best officers that we can, because it's important work that we have to do. It's with a challenging population, and they absolutely have to be role models to them.
Perfect. Over to you, Mr. Osowski.
Thank you for the question. Yes, very similarly, we spend a lot of time upfront screening applicants for certainly the frontline positions, but as well for managers. As I mentioned, we're very big on something called character-based leadership, which comes out of the Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario, which is really about the exercise of judgment. And we actually assess people, we recruit people. There's a whole interview process around it to make sure that we're getting the people at the very beginning that have the right comportment, if you will, for the work. And secondly, once they're here, then it's about the training program. There's a very robust training program for frontline officers that takes close to 20 weeks to complete, much of it on campus in our own training facility. But other training in terms of creating a respectful workplace, values and ethics and disclosures of wrongdoing, mental health awareness, diversity and race relationships. We've put all of these programs in place, and we've got very high completion rates, all of them around 90% or more completion rates so far. So we keep promoting these courses and offering that support to people so that they understand that this is the workplace environment that we're in now, and we're not dwelling on the past. We're moving forward with deliberate action.
Thank you. One of the things that that you've touched upon, I think Mr. Green also touched upon, is the fact that it's so critical that people speak up. And one of the things I guess I would challenge you on, Mr. Osowski, with all due respect, is you said that that one of the positive signs was that the amount of reports of harassment actually declined by 3% in your testimony. How do you know that that's actually meaning that there are less cases of complaints as opposed to people who it shows in the report that are fearful of reprisals? Like we've got really high numbers in both departments of 20 or 30%. How are you validating that the actual numbers of complaints are the actual violations your policies are declining as opposed to just the complaints?
A very short answer, Mr. Osowski.
So you have to look at the whole picture in terms of the informal activities that are happening as well as the formal, and that gives you sort of the spectrum, for example, of what's going on. But I think the sessions that were happening, which I mentioned with my dedicated culture team, it's continuous engagement. And so we're having a fairly good sense, even with our pulse surveys that we're doing, what the tone of the conversation and the culture of the organization is. So you have to look at the entire spectrum of not just data, but subjective information that we're hearing from staff. And people write me emails.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We will now move on to Mr. Sobera for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Obviously, as was stated earlier on Bell Let's Talk Day today, it's not lost upon me the discussion we're having on the environment that one finds themselves in the workplace. That environment obviously extends not only to the public sector, but to the private sector across our country. And every Canadian needs to know they can go to work every day when they leave their families free of harassment, free of discrimination, and free of any nonsense, if I can use that term and sum that up. My first question to the Auditor General, page 14, to the wonderful folks at the Auditor General, of course. Page 14, when as a sort of a data person, as a finance guy, I like to look at numbers. Numbers tend to tell a story and sometimes different stories for different people, but nonetheless tends to tell a story. And in terms of the robustness, you know, when I took my econometrics in graduate school some 25 years ago at the graduate level, we've always talked about robustness of the data sample. And when I see that nearly 16,000 employees of the CBSA were asked to participate in the survey, only the response rate was 38%. And on the Correctional Service Canada side, the survey, 19,000 employees, the response rate was 28%. How do we feel about that response rate in terms of the robustness of what comes out afterwards?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So as we conducted our audit, as you indicated, we followed a sort of a sound methodology to conduct a survey. We've consulted our experts within the OAG in terms of the sampling approach and sampling sort of methodology around that. We also ensure that these percentages, as you referred to, were appropriate, and we could use them to make sort of a pass to use the survey results. So we were satisfied of these percentages that we have come to.
Thank you for that answer. Because when I think of the CBSA, and I'll turn it over to CBSA and CSC, you know, these are organizations that have a lot of front-facing individuals. Individuals that deal with the Canadian public and also people coming into this country with Canadians and non-Canadians. And obviously, I would think many of these positions that these individuals occupy are very stressful positions. And we always want to create and strive for an environment that is supportive to these individuals. And these are my thoughts when reading over the report and the actions thereof. So now I'd like to turn to first CBSA, then CSC. How do we improve these response rates so people feel comfortable, frankly, filling out these applications or answering these questions that are posed to them, to the employees at first CBSA and then CSC?
Well, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I would just say that we're currently doing another round of public service employee survey is happening right now or is almost complete. And we're already seeing a higher participation rate than we have in the past, which I take as a good sign. We'll probably break 50%, which for us historically is a very good number. And I would just say anecdotally, any of the negative responses, whatever the participation rate, is something that we have to pay attention to. And the deliberate actions that I've talked about, regardless of the statistical significance of it, is something that we will continue to pursue. Thank you.
And then to CSC, I believe.
Yes, thank you for the question. So for us, it's all about engagement. I have to say that last year on our public service employee survey for the 2019, I believe we were the only federal department that actually increased its participation. We ended up at 48%, which for CSC was a step in the right direction. For this year, for the 2020 Public Service Employee Survey, I have to say we've set our objective very, very high, and there's a bit of competition going, and we're hoping, like my colleague, to exceed 50% response rate. We've set the bar very, very high, but anyways, we hope to get there. And certainly I've sent countless messages to the staff, and my regional deputy commissioners in each region are also doing the same thing. And actually this week, all of the staff in the regions are invited by each of the regional deputy commissioner. It's a half an hour that's scheduled in their calendar, and they're going to be asked to complete the survey if they haven't already done so.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sobera. Your time is up.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. We will move to our next round of questioning. It's a 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Joquin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to come back to Mr. Dompierre. Mr. Dompierre, as you stated in your opening statement, and as you mentioned, so that complaints be dealt with, people have to be able to make complaints, but there are some incoherences in the process to deal with complaints. And if I look at the figures, they're alarming. So at CBSA and at CSC, both, for harassment complaints, 2 employees out of 4 say that there are problems in the decision-making process. Workplace complaints, it's also catastrophic, over 3 employees out of 4. So there seems to be a procedural decision-making issue. And also you said that this can create a perception that reduces the level of trust in the process among employees. So I'm really trying to understand, how do you want employees to feel that they can make a complaint if they feel that the decision-making process is stacked against them before even beginning? I'm not really sure about your question. Do you want my opinion? I don't really understand what you're getting at. What will it take? What will it take to bring about real change so that people will trust a decision-making process with regards to complaints? In your report, it says that people don't feel confident. It says that there can be a reduction of confidence and that people feel that the process is stacked against them. You're also saying that you can't solve issues if you're not aware of complaints. Well, thank you. Okay. Answer. If we want for a complaint to be considered and dealt with properly, we need to have an initial assessment. People have to trust that if they go ahead and if they table a complaint, that it will be dealt with, considered, and assessed correctly. In the context of the example you're giving, there's an obligation on behalf of investigators to look at the complaint and to compare it, for example, to the definition of harassment. What constitutes harassment? Then they also have to document this information and demonstrate that they made the correct decision. Within the framework of our work, we noticed that in these files, some information was missing. So coming back to what you were saying, complaints have to be considered and dealt with correctly so that people have trust in the system. They should not fear reprisals, and we have to make sure that that complaints are dealt with adequately.
Thank you very much. We will now move to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. And in the opening remarks of my friend, Mr. Weber, he zeroed in on that these departments were picked, but other departments weren't picked. And I think that this is an important step forward for us to perhaps look at where else we might want to look, including, of course, Parliament Hill. So through you to the Auditor General, Mr. Dompierre, as a part of your audit, you asked CBSA and CSC employees to respond to a survey on 3 themes: lack of civility and respect, the organizational culture, and reporting harassment without fear or reprisal. And you noted that employees in both organizations had serious concerns about these points. Did you note any significant differences in responses between men and women and racialized employees? And if yes, what were they?
So we did not sort of specifically disaggregate the data to demonstrate the comparison you just made. So we only got the information as it was presented in the report. So we did not specifically analyze the information, just for example, male, female, or other ways.
Is that possible given the data, or is it possible as a follow-up?
That could be possible for the future in terms of how we would conduct maybe future audit work.
Does the mandate of your office include a gender-based analysis plus mandate?
Definitely, we can go and look at gender plus elements. We have no restriction in that area. So this is even something that we are going to be pursuing more in the future and adding as part of any audits that we have underway to apply that specific lens.
How far in the future? Is this something that you're committing to undertaking immediately? And I say this, we're on the heels now of a pretty public report, a scathing report on the Governor General. We're hearing reports from other boards and agencies. What commitment can we have from you, sir, that you will include gender-based analysis plus, including critical components around anti-Black racism, the plus side of the GBA plus, to ensure that we have clear data on what's happening at the ground level for employees? I just to add to you that we are also under a class action lawsuit from Black employees against the federal government currently, like right now.
So this is definitely something that has been put on my radar as Assistant Auditor General to ensure that as we conduct our performance audit, that we consider gender-based plus in the work that we do in terms of specific criteria. And also, as we look at some of the data, that we ensure that we properly disaggregate the data to see these differences and these challenges by these vulnerable populations. So this is definitely something that will be considered for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Green. Moving on to our next round of questioning, which is Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question here is addressed to Mr. Wasowski and Ms. Kelly, please. As you both are very aware, many people working for organizations historically say that they don't come forward because they are not believed and that they really never get a resolution that they expect. And so it's just easier not to rock the boat. And so I am interested to know what percentage of complaints in your organizations are determined as legitimate complaints. Are most determined legitimate, or are they dismissed? Because, when I'm reading here, Exhibit 1.3 of the audit report, if I'm reading it correctly, the vast majority of complaints are rejected, and many early in the process too. So, is that correct? Is that occurring in your organizations? Mr. Wasowski, I guess you can go first, or Ms. Kelly, whoever.
Sure, I can start. Thank you for the question. So in our case of 64 cases, and I think it's important to understand the process that initially when a complaint happens, there's an acknowledgement, obviously, and the first thing that managers consider is whether or not there needs to be a separation of parties. Then there's an analysis and a decision point about whether or not it meets the definition. If it does not meet the definition, then it goes to an informal process to resolve. And of the 64 cases in the last year, Louise, in the last 2 years, 7% were deemed to have been founded in our case. So that's at the final end of it, and then that's when a restoration process would begin.
7%. Interesting. Ms. Kelly, the CSC.
For us, it would be around the same thing as what my colleague from CBSA just said. It's the same process. In terms of total complaints, for example, in 2019, 2020, we had 139, and there's 4 that were founded.
4 founded as legitimate complaints of the
And
139.
many are still ongoing.
Interesting. Okay. Well, staying with you, Ms. Kelly, then in section 1.26 of the audit report, the CSC, over a 2-year period between 2017 and 2018, it completed 18 assessments of 148 of your organizational units, your units such as the institutions and parole offices and such. And of course, these assessments identify the risks to safety, security, and well-being of the employees in each of these units in order to later develop a strategy in each unit to manage risks. But by only doing 18 of 149 assessments of 148 organizational units, that's just over 10% of the CSC's entire organization. 10% of assessments. So does this really show a deep organizational commitment of identifying risks to the employees? Just from the report, my gut feeling, it just tells me that this looks like it is sort of a foot dragging. I know it was back in 2017, 2018, and I'm sure things have improved since, but I guess my question to you, Ms. Kelly, is why were there only 10% of CSC's organizational units assessed back then? And where are we now? Where are we now with the unit assessments? Have we assessed all your units?
No, they haven't all been assessed yet. However, we had started this initiative, which is the Ethical Risk Assessment Initiative. And certainly the goal is to conduct ethical risk assessment at each site to help us better understand the most prevalent risks at each site, and then inform, mitigation strategies. And certainly with the work that we did, though, it did inform our workplace wellness and employee well-being strategy that we have now developed. And as I said, it's comprehensive. It has pillars, it has guidelines, it has objectives and plans, and it has key performance and wellness indicators, because we want to monitor the progress. This is very, very, very important for us.
Wonderful. Just a timeline, Ms. Kelly, when do you think that these assessments of all your units will be completed?
So unfortunately, what's happened is because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to obviously travel. Hopefully soon we will be out of this, so we will resume our ethical risk assessment initiative, and I'll be able to provide the committee with more concrete timelines when we know that we can resume our activities.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. We will now move on to Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the witnesses, and really thanks to committee members. This is a tremendous discussion we're having. Mr. Green, you took my main question of gender-based analysis, and the fact that when I looked at Exhibit 1.1, I couldn't see how concerns around harassment, reprisal, civility, and respect were being defined by types of people within the organization, whether it's gender-based or racialized information. Statistics Canada is now providing us information on poverty and on other social members. And so maybe a comment back to the Auditor General's office, to Mr. Dompierre, is that anything in active discussions with the Auditor General's office?
Definitely, that's something that we are considering and looking at. So rest assured that GBA Plus and the disaggregation of data will be considered in future audit work.
Super, thank you. And Mr. Osowski, you made a comment right at the tail end of one of your statements about reading emails. And our youngest daughter directed us towards a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma, and the impact of social media on polarization, on hate, on online harassment. when I was managing organizations myself, I wondered about the impact of the outside world on our culture within the workplace. How much work is being done through your management teams in terms of the dilemma of looking at private information versus looking at information that could impact the workplace?
So if you're referring to looking at social media feeds that employees might be using and on, so certainly as part of the recruitment process, we have a look at that. Once you're an employee, we're working currently with the Treasury Board, and I recall a previous committee meeting here where Ms. May suggested that we needed to do more about people that were current employees, and we are working with the Treasury Board Secretariat as the employer to see what more we could do to look at those social media feeds and proactively identify problematic employees.
Great, and I mean that's also a topic for Heritage that I know that Heritage is looking at, not within the scope of the audit, but still an important factor, especially with everybody being more online now with COVID. Ms. Kelly, I just performed a 360 review of my staff. I had it done through the House of Commons HR. Very, very valuable tool to have my staff be able to speak openly to an HR person, and that I can get an anonymous report back to say, here's some areas of concern between staff members or between staff members and me as a manager. Is this some type of tool that you're using within your organization in terms of 360 feedback between management and staff, and also between staff and staff?
No, it's not something that we're using as a common practice. However, it's certainly something that I would be open to. I think that, again, it's always good to know what people are feeling and get the feedback. And this is how you can improve in an organization. Definitely, however, we are having much more discussions around respect, in even part of a respectful workplace campaign. It's divided by themes. So we have themes like know where to draw the line, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in an organization, small gestures, big impacts, how small things have a big impact on the organization. We had a theme, it's all about respect. What do you want to be? So it highlights the good stories. Words matter. And even in each of our institution and our parole offices, we have a wall of respect where people can write kind gestures that others have done. And it's been quite popular, actually. But we're doing a lot to,
Yeah, thank you. And maybe Mr. Ozowski, another similar comment of how do you get the external review of yourself as a manager?
So thank you for the question. So certainly 360 upward feedback as well. There's also something called a skip level meeting that we employ. So you basically go past your immediate supervisor and then have a chat with the person above the supervisor. So you have you don't have that filter necessarily in the way. So looking at all of those, we have all of those tools in place.
Good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Now going to another round of questioning, a 6-minute round. We will go to Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, and I apologize for the roving children from the previous edition. I would just like to, I'd like to start with you again, Mr. Ozowski, and in that it is about Let's Talk. Just say that any of your employees are watching. I just want to give you 10, 15 seconds to say what would, and they're feeling harassed or they're feeling discriminated against, what would you say to them and what would you have them do right here, right now?
I would say, speak up. If you're not feeling well, let's talk about it. If it's something that we can't help you with, then there's resources that we can point you to help you out. And I think that's something where throughout the pandemic, we've really doubled down on keeping in touch with people because we're often working from home. I'm in the office most days myself, but often working from home, and you have to double down on those efforts to reach out and just check in on people and see how they're doing.
Again, Ms. Kelly, can I give you the same opportunity?
Thank you. I'd say the same thing is speak up. And also, I think that sometimes there are what we call bystanders. And if people see misconduct occurring, they also have a responsibility to speak up as well so that we can address the problems in the organization and just make it a safe and healthier workplace.
And then maybe an open question, including to the Auditor General. I am not familiar with what the target range should be. I would assume that perhaps 0, although obviously that's where we'd all want to be to, maybe is not realistic. But what is when we look at the survey numbers and we see what do the top organizations do? And maybe Mr. Ozowski and Ms. Kelly, what's your target for that survey? Do you want it to read 5%? And when do you want it to, or 0%? And when do you want to read that by? May I start with you, Mr. Ozowski? Sorry.
Sure. I wasn't sure if the Auditor General was going to reply first. Absolutely, the goal would be great to be 0. I think that's a little unrealistic because you've got new employees that come into the workforce. It's their first workforce environment. They don't want to rock the boat, so they just follow along. So the culture is so important. Like, what is that culture that they're coming into as a shiny new officer, and how will they respond to it, right? So creating that right culture is the first effort. So I don't know that I'm looking at a numerical result. Obviously, I'd like 0, but I think that the culture piece and sort of seeing how people respond to those changes and feel welcomed and supported, that's what I want to hear back from my staff.
Ms. Kelly?
Well, it's same with me. I'd like to see a 0. For us, again, we're working really hard. One component is creating a safe space where people feel that they can speak up, they are going to be listened to, that their issues are going to be taken seriously and are going to be looked at. And the other thing is increasing the trust. I think we really need some trust between employees and managers, employees and senior managers. I think that's very, very important. And that's why actually we're doing an audit of the CSC culture. And that idea actually came to me when I read that in Ireland, their police force actually embarked on a culture of their police force. And it sounded really interesting. So my audit team is looking at that for CSC.
And then once again, I'll go to both Ms. Kelly and Mr. Ozowski on this. It's an axiom of business and of management that what gets measured gets improved. In your personal evaluations, are the amount of harassment claims, the amount of discrimination claims, is that included in your annual evaluations?
Maybe I can start. Yes, it is. So for example, for harassment, in 2019-20, we had 50 fewer harassment complaints from the previous year. For our discrimination, these are the ones before the Canadian Human Rights. It's remained fairly consistent over the last 3 fiscal years. And for the workplace violence, it's been a steady decrease in the last 3 fiscal years. We went from 45 to 22. So definitely something that we monitor.
Mr. Ozowski?
Yeah, same with us. The net new has dropped from last year from 66 to 35. But I would just say that on the point that was raised previously about fear of reprisal, if the numbers go up, then there's obviously a concern there that the informal mechanisms didn't work. But at least we're dealing with them, and I think having those actions in place to actually deal with them is what I'm more focused on than how the number might be fluctuating. Obviously, I want to see a trend line going down, but I'm more focused as a performance measure in terms of all of the parts of the process and how they are working.
Okay. Just how much time do I have left, Madam Chair?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, perfect. In the spirit of congeniality, I will concede that to the next speaker there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. We will move to Mr. Fergus for 6 minutes.
Alors, Madame la Présidente, j'aimerais remercier Monsieur Lawrence.
I'd like to thank Mr. Lawrence for giving me these 30 seconds. So I hope that, 6 minutes and 30 seconds. First of all, I would like to thank the witnesses for appearing here and also for my colleagues for asking such probing questions. Not only am I an MP, but also I have the privilege of being part of the caucus of Black parliamentarians. And so our witnesses will understand why I'm going to ask my questions with regards to discrimination in their ranks. First off, my question is for the Auditor General's office. I think that there is a unanimous consensus. I could even say that there is a consensus that in the future, when studies will be made with regards to these types of issues, we really need to disaggregate the data. We need to have disaggregated data. It's so important. We need to be able to see what problems exist. Women, racialized women, vulnerable women that are targeted through equity programs. So I think that in the future, it's extremely important to ask these questions. This should not be done retroactively. It should be part of the process. So my question, Mr. Osowski, is for Mr. Osowski and for Mrs. Allen. You said in your answer, I forgot who you said this to. You said that acts of discrimination are sometimes among employees. And these discrimination cases are among employees and not necessarily between management and employees. However, when I look at the Auditor General's report, the conclusion is that it says that we've noted that the organizations had ordered measures of redress for those involved. In other words, measures of redress did not seek to reestablish or establish harmonious workplace practices. It's important because the behavior at the heart of these complaints can have an impact on workplace relations in the long run. I 100% agree with this statement from the representative of the OAG, but I'd like to hear from you. Do you think it's important to have a context and it's not a dispute between two employees, but to understand if something happens that there has to be a following up of the process laid out by Treasury Board and to seek a broader understanding of the issue where we have these cases of discrimination?
Thank you for the question. So just to be clear, when I was referring to the employee versus employee as the majority of the cases, I was referring to harassment cases. So a full 53% of harassment complaints are employees versus employee. That's what I was referring to. With respect to discrimination,
Mais ce n'est pas tout à fait la même chose.
Isn't this the same thing? So it's the culture. Shouldn't we be concerned with organizational culture and just issues between two people? If a person feels free to harass another or to discriminate against another, it's because there exists this type of a culture where it's permissible.
I absolutely agree with you. And I would just say that when we look at the breakdown of the types of harassment, discrimination is probably one of the lowest factors. It's more like unfair treatment, humiliation, bullying, an offensive remark. And those all speak to the culture that we're trying to unpack and make more healthy by, as I say, I'm taking off the Band-Aid and we're going to talk about it. And I think it's really important that you understand from my perspective that no one's satisfied with this culture. And I think that's the key about changing it. If we're not satisfied about it, then we have to take responsibility for it. It's our culture. It's not somebody else's survey results. These are our survey results. Nobody likes it. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? And that's the conversation we have to have over and over and over again, in addition to the training and the tools so people can have better soft skills abilities to have those tough conversations, intervene in those situations, the collective responsibility that I spoke about. Absolutely, the culture is the key here, but culture is very hard to measure. It's hard to put a data point on it, and that's why I'm focusing on these conversations.
Merci pour ça. Madame Allen.
Thank you. Mrs. Allen, when you talk about this report, where they have devastating conclusions, really, I would like to hear from you and perhaps Mr. Osowski as well. When did you notice that these problems existed? Were discussions undertaken with employees? But not only that, did you try to go back into the past to see if complaints that were laid in the past should be revisited, should be reconsidered?
I'm sorry, we have run out of time, Mr. Fergus. We are at 6.5 minutes. Perhaps we could have the witness follow up with a written response to your question.
Je suis entre vos mains, Madame Bloch. C'est dommage. J'aurais.
That's a shame. I really would have liked to have the answer to my question.
I do understand that, and we did give you the time that was given to you by one of your colleagues. Perhaps if you do have the opportunity to follow up in another round, or we could request that answer in writing.
Vous êtes en sourdine, Madame.
Thank you. We will now move on to Mr. Blanchette-Joncan for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Donc, ma question.
Thank you. So my question will be for Mrs. Kelly. Thank you, Mrs. Kelly, for being here. You said in your opening statements, and I noted, a culture shift doesn't happen overnight, and I agree. However, we see that in 2005, already 32% of the employees of CSC were saying that they had suffered harassment from superiors over the past 2 years, and that was already 2 times more than the average in the public service that was 17%. And so now if we look at today's data, it's still troubling and devastating. You know, CSC in the survey from the OAG, almost 3 employees out of 4 are concerned, and they have huge or serious concerns on organizational culture. Also, and they also fear reprisals. If someone is a victim of an act of harassment, discrimination, violence, that they fear reprisals if they raise this incident. And so this is 1% out of 2. And what we see also, Mrs. Kelly, is that this organizational culture seems to have gotten worse. If I look at the incident in 2016 with the Commissioner to Integrity, who talked about the behavior of Brigitte Leblanc, who is the director of the Offender Division until 2015. There was a report that says that she had a climate of terror during her years there. And even at that time, these facts had been reported in February 2017. The Deputy Commissioner of CSC, Mr. Motyuk, had been the object of an investigation. There was testimony that showed certain issues, but with regards to the information and the allegation with regards to Mrs. Deblois, this doesn't give anything. You were there on an interim basis, and then disciplinary measures were taken against Mrs. Debois and Mr. Motyuk. And so here's my question today. It is very simple. I'm trying to understand. For several years, this has continued. There are devastating facts. Why now, in 2021, CSC and harassment, why isn't this as a business risk, an organizational risk factor?
Naturellement, on travaille fort.
Well, we're working hard on this issue, and as I said, with regards to harassment, in 2019-2020, we saw a reduction of complaints linked to harassment. These are subjects that are discussed. They're discussed on a regular basis. Now, as for fear of reprisals, what we did is that we instituted a tip line, and we also have a generic email where people can raise concerns and fears. We also have strict language in all our documents for superiors and managers. As for civility and respect, we have our annual report on climate in the workplace, and we also have a database that allows us to see if progress is being made over the years to come. And as for the organizational culture, we're working on this extremely hard. As I say, we do have an annual strategy. It's a very comprehensive strategy, and we're going to do an audit of our organizational culture, the culture of the service. So many initiatives have been put in place. Thank you, Mrs. Kelly. I'm going to be more specific. The organizational culture is from top to the bottom. So the officials inspire people throughout the organization. At the time, we were not able to find out when Mrs. Deblois and Mr. Moutier what they had neglected in their inaction. We didn't have any details on the sanctions, and they're still working, both of them, their director and deputy commissioner. So they had a climate of terror at the time. We understand that the pyramid is from top to bottom. This organizational culture trickles down. And could you affirm today that among the officials at CSC, there's no problem, no issue like what was observed during 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, if we look at Mrs. Deblois' behavior that was reprimanded? Answer: yes, I can affirm that things are not like this way anymore. And in this case, myself as commissioner, I met with all concerned in this division, and I spoke to them, and they shared with me how they felt. Once again, within the organization, we talk about this a lot. This is an issue that is on each and every meeting agenda. My management team knows exactly what are my expectations. And yes, I can affirm that they are taking the necessary measures when issues are raised. Now, with regards to these measures, Mrs. Kelly, if we talk about Mrs. Deblois, more specifically, did they receive training on organizational culture? There were changes because, okay, there was a sanction with regard to her behavior, but then people have to be trained. They have to have some sort of training to ensure that the organizational culture reflected throughout the organization be favorable and positive.
Oui, absolument.
Yes, absolutely. Right now, we've introduced mandatory classes to create a healthy work environment, and we have also violence in the workplace training.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blanchet-Chaucan. We will now move to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you. And picking up on MP Blanchet-Chaucan, as well as bringing back MP Fergus's question, my question through you to Commissioner Kelly is Mr. Fergus's question related to Mr. Jonca's question. Are you opening up the ability for past complaints to pursue in a more healthy environment, a more fulsome complaints process, or is there a statute of limitations that is going to say that what's in the past is in the past?
So we have people come forward, and obviously we've reassessed the complaints. again, there's lots of discussion going on in the organization. The other thing I would say, one of the question was around restorative actions, because, and I think it's Mr. Fergus that was talking about that. And I think that's very, very important, because whenever there's a conflict, whether it's between employees, whether it's the employee and the manager, it impacts the whole work area. And it's, once lines are drawn in the sand, then it becomes really messy as far as I'm concerned. So what we do is we use the Office of Conflict Resolution very quickly to work with the impacted area. We do workplace surveys. We have facilitators to work, again, with the area. And we have mandated that senior management meet with the staff, because we want to restore the whole workplace. It's not just the individuals.
I would agree. And in fact, I wish that we had that same outlook in our treatment of inmates and incarcerated people in this legal system. The results of this report demonstrated deeply concerning workplace culture, which does not address, I think, adequately harassment and discrimination that is committed between employees. So since violence between employees has not been addressed, I wonder, what are the frameworks that are put in place to address and prevent harassment and discrimination from employees towards people who are incarcerated?
So, as I say often, and I say it in graduation ceremonies, I use it almost all the time. There's no greater responsibility than having the care and custody of other human beings. And that's what they are, human beings. And I repeatedly say to all staff, and I have town halls with the staff, is you have to be role models. It's a challenging population. They are in our institutions because obviously they committed crimes. Many of them are impulsive. Many have mental health issues. And as people who work with this population, we absolutely have to be role models. And this is something I stress repeatedly with my regional deputy commissioners as well. So I do believe, although we're working on the culture, it's not just for staff, but it's how we deal with staff with managers, but also staff with offenders.
I want to acknowledge, 37 years is an incredible service to the country, and certainly, the job in which your members have to provide as a public service to community is certainly a very complex one, and one that requires a tremendous amount of skills, both hard and soft. But I have to say that given your time in the corporation and your clear success as a commissioner, rising to a commissioner, when my previous speaker talked about the fact that this hadn't been flagged as a corporate risk, can we assume that if harassment had been included as a corporate risk 10 years earlier, that some of the risk mitigation measures would have been already taken and some of these incidents of harassment would not have occurred?
I'm not sure whether or not it would have occurred, but definitely it's something that we're focusing on. It's harassment, discrimination, systemic racism, workplace violence. These are all things that there's zero tolerance for those.
Commissioner Kelly, I have to share with you that I am challenged in the language of public service around acknowledging these systemic issues, but not necessarily having accountability. So it's alarming for me that if we can't make that assumption that flagging as a corporate risk and taking action would have mitigated it, then what would give us the assurance from this audit moving forward that the steps that you're going to take on a move forward basis would have an impact in changing the culture in a future tense?
But it's a corporate priority. So it's definitely flagged, and it's something that we are working on. Absolutely.
So in your opinion, why wasn't it identified and included in CSC's corporate risk documents earlier is the basic question. And then I think the assumption is that had they been included, based on what you've just described, we would have been in a better place. And yet that wasn't your response.
Included in our corporate risk priorities?
Correct.
Okay.
Are you not understanding the question? So
No,
I'll be clear that the Public Service Employee Survey between 2017 and 2018 had not formally stated in its corporate risk documents that it had been a serious issue of harassment. That leads me to say that you only addressed it after people got caught, and that's a problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. I recognize that wasn't a question, but an observation, and your time is up. We will now move to the next round of questioning for 5 minutes. Mr. Lawrence. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Weber.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a little bit of a surprise, but I think I have something here. I'm going to rely on some questions from the Library of Parliament. I'm going to ask a question, but according to the Auditor General, actions taken to restore harmonious working relationships after an investigation into a harassment complaint must focus not only on the people directly involved, but also the team as a whole. So to both the CBSA and the CSC, how will you ensure that restorative measures include the whole team and not only the people affected by the complaint? And I apologize if this was asked before. I didn't realize I was up again, but thank you. First, Ms. Kelly.
Okay, and I think I just spoke to that in terms of...
Okay, I apologize.
Yes, the restorative actions, but
yes.
I'll just repeat it that for us, it's very important that although the conflict may be between people, individuals, it normally has an impact on the whole area. And this is why we immediately, our Office of Conflict Resolution gets involved to work with the impacted area. We look at workplace surveys to see how people are doing. And again, senior management, we meet with the staff just to ensure that people can raise any concerns, preoccupations that they have. But our goal is always to restore the whole workplace area.
I'm sure Ms. Kelly also, and this is not part of the audit, but with the pandemic this past year, I'm sure that the stress levels have significantly increased. I know they have with the correctional services and such. And I would imagine that you probably are overloaded with issues with staff and with your clients that are in your facilities. Can you talk a bit about how you are addressing these issues that have, I'm sure, escalated immensely?
So actually, yes. So during wave one, we had 360 offenders that tested positive, and we had 2 deaths. During wave 2 now, we have only 15 active cases at this point. In terms of our staff, we have 511 that have tested positive, but 94% have been resolved. Definitely, it's been difficult. I have to say, I want to acknowledge the work of all staff, especially our frontline correctional officers, because our business, it's 24/7, 365 days a year, and they do fantastic work. We've really been working hand in hand, and I applaud their work. The other thing is it's been difficult because when we have cases of COVID, positive cases in our institutions, we need to restrict movement. But I have to say that I have received more letters from offenders than ever, thanking the organization for keeping them safe. So, and I correspond with the staff and with the offenders weekly, telling them exactly what's happening. So everybody is informed of the situation. But thank you for that question.
Well, thank you for that answer. Excellent. Excellent. I know not part of the audit as well, but with regard to your staff and vaccinations, has that occurred? Have they received their vaccinations?
So we follow the National Advisory Committee guidelines. And so for us, we received a certain number of doses. We actually split them up. So, and according to the NACI guidelines, it's offenders that are older, so 70 plus. And if we don't have that number, then it's by tranche of 5 years. So it would be 65 plus that have underlying health conditions. My understanding so far is we've used the doses that we had received.
Thank you for that, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. You do have 20 seconds left, but...
Oh, okay. Well, I'll graciously pass that on to who's next, please.
Thank you very much. We will now move to Mr. Blois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for their testimony here today. Obviously, I'm at the back of the bus in terms of questions that have been already asked and some of the dialogue, but I want to go a little bit broader because, of course, we're looking at the results of the Auditor General's report in this specific area. Ms. Kelly, Mr. Green pointed out that you've been in public service for 37 years. Thank you for your work. I want to know from your perspective, you've been in with the CSC for 37 years. Have you noticed a trend and a gradual improvement in terms of just even having conversations about workplace harassment? You've got almost 4 decades worth of experience. Can you speak a little bit about how we've been able to move the meter in the right direction? There's certainly still more work to be done, but can you speak to that? You're on mute, Ms. Kelly, sorry.
Sorry. Yes, thank you for that question. I started in 1983. I've worked in many institutions, both in Ontario and in the Pacific region. Definitely, I've seen some improvements along the way. First of all, when I started, I was one of the few women. There were not that many women in 1983. And I became a manager fairly quickly. And often I found myself around the only woman in the room. In terms of harassment, discrimination, workplace violence, I think that it's much more open than it was when I started 37 years ago. I would say in those days, I think people didn't come forward as much. I think there's also generational differences. 37 years ago, I think it was more, you went to work, you did your job, you went back home. Now what I see is people are much more willing to share how they're feeling, what's happening. And I think it's a good thing. And they're also quite willing to share it with the top levels of the organization. So I myself get messages from staff, and every message I get, I respond. And it's the same for all of my executive committee. So for me, definitely some positive changes. And I think the biggest change is just the willingness to talk about it. And I do believe it's a shared responsibility. Everybody has a role to play to ensure that your environment is safe and healthy.
And I appreciate that. And so obviously we need to continue to move that. I think that's the benefit of having these committees where we can revisit on ways that we can improve to try to get even better in the days ahead. Mr. Dompierre, obviously, as was already mentioned, these are 2 particular organizations that you took a look at. I know the question's already been asked about why and what other organizations you might consider in the future. But I'm sure that the Auditor General's Office, I assume, has done the harassment, the discrimination, and workplace violence audits in the past, perhaps. I know we're thinking about this more and more. Can you speak to how these audits may or may not have changed over time in comparison to other ones that might have been done even 5, 7, 10 years ago?
Thank you for the question. I don't specifically recall a number of audits that we've conducted in that area, but we are definitely considering other audits for the future and making sure that as we conduct our own analysis of risk related specifically to organization within the federal government, that we apply that lens and consider based on the risk that we come across, that if there's any future audits to be conducted in that area, we will definitely consider those audits.
And I just want to go to Ms. Gomez quickly, because of course you were the lead within the OAG in terms of this particular report. And my apologies if this was already asked, but in terms of looking at actually how this audit went down, was it looking at the internal review processes and dossiers of files? Was it talking to employees directly? Can you speak in about the 40 seconds I have left about how that looked like on the ground?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, primarily we did a file review. So the results that we have in the table results is a result of the file review that we did do. In the planning phase, we always do interviews to try to scope the audit. So there were some interviews, but primarily it was done through the file review and through the survey that we've reported on in the report.
And just quickly, I know Ms. Block, maybe 10 seconds, moving forward, is it beneficial to have some of that interview evidence for the intrinsic kind of, I know we have a certain process we need to file, but is there certain areas where there could be mitigation of some of this informally without going through a process that we can't necessarily capture the culture and some of the good practices that are being done?
Who is that directed to?
I'm sorry, to Ms. Gomez or to Mr. Dompierre, if they want to take 10 or 15 seconds.
Thank you. So basically, as we do our audits, as it's been said, any opportunities that we have to consider some of the observation we do collect during the interviews are considered as evidence and also would be considered to be included in our report. So in this context, we, as Madam Gomez mentioned, we focused on the file review as well as the survey. So basically, that's where the angle of this audit was. We did not look at individual specific cases, how the complaints and why the complaint was made, but more on the specific process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. We now will move to our last round of questioning, which is a 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. This will be a question for Mr. Dompierre and also an important observation from Mr. Obzovsky and Mrs. Kelly. We know that in the news we've heard about the work climate at Rideau Hall, and it's troubling to see that even the Governor General, according to the news reports that we are hearing now, we are hearing about reprehensible behavior at the highest level of states, and this is awful. So will there be follow-up? Will this be on your radar for the good of the employees? So in my opinion, the example has to come from the top. It can't be any more of a high office than the Governor General. Yes, we're doing risk analysis continuously. We look at all federal entities. There's an obligation on behalf of federal entities to make sure that there's a healthy workplace environment, exempt of harassment, discrimination, and violence in the workplace. And if there's work to be done on future federal entities on this, we're certainly going to take that into consideration. Thank you. Now, Mr. Osowski and Mrs. Kelly, I know that the observation mechanisms, if we look at the policies, you have to ensure employee respect and prevention programs. The Prime Minister asked for the resignation of the Governor General for reasons that we are all aware of. So how can you make sure that there will be necessary leadership so that you will be cited an example by the OAG, or in the management of the work environment of your employees? How are you going to ensure this change?
Look, certainly, I just want to reiterate our, sorry, I'm hearing myself here. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on there. It sounds better. I just want to reassure you that all of the management cadre in the organization is committed to this. We hold our managers to a higher standard than employees. We're providing with the support and training, but we're actively monitoring this. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing an audit on ourselves on this matter in the coming year. We're also just looking at other mechanisms. We've got a heat map process where we're looking to see where the hotspots are so we can dive in quickly. We're actually looking at using a third-party firm using artificial intelligence with the Department of Justice to actually understand where there might be some of those areas that we need to dive into quickly. So this is a full court press as far as I'm concerned, and we are showing leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca. For the last questioning for this meeting, we will go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I feel obligated to provide Commissioner Kelly with the opportunity to respond to my earlier question so that it didn't come off as a hostile statement. So I'll reframe it. Section 1.25, before the 2017-2018 fiscal year, the OAG states that we also found that neither organization had a comprehensive strategy to address harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence. This meant that the organizations had not defined overall strategic objectives, nor had they prioritized how to achieve them. Both organizations reviewed complaint statistics and results from employee surveys, including the PS employment survey. However, neither organizations had performance measurements frameworks. So why did it take media reports of harassment at the CSC in 2016 and 2017 to get you to add harassment, discrimination, and violence in the workplace as a part of your corporate risk profile?
Okay, thank you. So it's true that the Auditor General found we didn't have a comprehensive strategy, but what we did have are many, many activities that were ongoing. So, and what we did is consolidated that into a comprehensive strategy. So it's not that we weren't paying attention to harassment, discrimination, or workplace violence. Definitely not. So what we did with our workplace wellness and employee well-being, as I said, it's now based on operational, corporate, ethical risk. It has pillars, 3 pillars. It
Respectfully,
has
Commissioner, I have to interject because activities do not equal outcomes. And you've referenced many times in your presentation corporate language around organizational behavior without drilling down on accountability measures. And this is where I think there's a disconnect in the culture of what we're seeing with the continued poor outcomes. And so you're going to go on the record and say that it had nothing to do with the attention that came in 2016 and 2017, that it just so happened to be the case that you addressed it after the fact?
No, it was always something that we were concerned about.
But you didn't have a plan for?
No, we had, I wouldn't say we didn't have a plan. What the Auditor General said is it wasn't in a consolidated, comprehensive strategy. And based on the AG's recommendation, that's what we developed.
Thank you. That satisfies me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. And with that, we are done our questioning for our presenters today. I would like to thank you very much for joining us, for having this conversation with us. And I will now invite you to leave our meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Well, thank you very much, colleagues. That was an excellent meeting with excellent questions, and we are on time, and I thank you for that. And Mr. Fergus, I would ask you to indicate to me afterwards if you were satisfied with the follow-up question by Mr. Green, if you were satisfied with the answer, or if you would like a follow-up written response.
I would still appreciate a written response. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and we will ask for that. Colleagues, you were provided with a new proposed calendar for the meetings for January and February. As I had indicated earlier, the Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada has a conflict for the upcoming meeting on Tuesday. So we provided you with the adjusted calendar where he will appear at a later date. Do you have any questions concerning the proposed calendar that we circulated? Great. If there are no questions, then
just a quick note, if we could, for the tech folks on the other side, Madam Chair, figure out what that reverb is. Very distracting, throws you off your game. And I'm hoping that a year in, we can get that sorted out. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm hoping that we can get on it real quick and make sure that it doesn't distract from the interventions in the future.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that intervention. All right. Is the committee in agreement to adjourn the meeting?
Jean-Claire, Monsieur.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Blanchette-Joquin.
A simple information. Could we check what is the usual delay to receive a written answer? We had a meeting last December 3rd. We received a few answers from the Department of Finance. We're waiting for some answers. I'm trying to understand what the normal period is. What is a normal period to receive a written response from a department?
Thank you, Mr. Jonca. Angela?
There's no standard delay. Normally, the department will respond fairly quickly. In this case, perhaps they missed that particular question in the meeting, but I have followed up with them and hope to have that response in a fairly timely manner.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So, is the committee in agreement to adjourn the meeting?
Yep.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Have a great day.
Madam Kelly,
we didn't even get anything. We didn't even get anything from Fraser. What happened? You guys brought in the big guns and you didn't get a chance.